So for everyone listening, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. This
Thank you.
is another spontaneous DM in the Nostr DMs because, as we were talking about before, I am just spending more and more time on Nostr, and everyone there is dialed in. So it's really easy to just reach out to anyone there. They know what's going on. They have interesting things to say because you don't make it to Nostr this early unless you got a few things figured out. So let me make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Joachim?
Joakim is the Swedish way. When I lived in Latin
Joachim.
America, it was always Joaquim or Joaco. English speakers tend to butcher it a little bit. It's all right. Whatever you want.
Joachim. I'll
Yeah,
I'll try to keep that correct. So this is Joachim Book. That part's right?
that's all right.
Awesome. So Joachim, by way of introduction, according to his bio, he is a writer with an unhealthy addiction to financial history and all things money, nature, yoga, carnivore, and Bitcoin. Joachim holds a master's degree from the University of Oxford, has had his work featured in the Financial Times, Mises Institute, Zero Hedge, and many other outlets. He is also a regular contributor and co-founder of the Swedish liberty site Causpaya.se and a frequent writer at CapX, Notes on Liberty, and HumanProgress.org. So, Joachim, thank you so much for joining me here today, sir.
Thank you for having me, man. I've been a fan of your work for a while.
Excellent. Well, why don't we just start with a bit of your backstory? I'd love to hear about your upbringing. There aren't a whole, and so you're Swedish, I'm assuming, right?
Swedish, but I live in Iceland, so I did flee
Hmm.
part of Scandinavia for an even more remote place.
Gotcha. So, yeah, that's quite rare still in the Bitcoin world. There aren't a whole lot of Swedes or Scandinavians in general. So I'd love to
Yeah,
hear
there are a
just a bit
couple.
about your
There are a couple.
backstory.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, not that many, but I don't know. Maybe proportionately, it's fine. You know, Scandinavia is only something like 25 million people. It's
True.
the state of Pennsylvania or something. So maybe. But Knut Svanholm is a
Yep,
big
that's a
famous
good one.
guy,
I had
right?
him on way early on. True.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and a bunch of Norwegians are really good. There's some Finnish
That's
people
true.
too. They're setting up a conference in Finland next year, I think. So there's some minor stuff happening.
Awesome. So let's get a bit of your backstory. Where
All
did
right,
you come from, and how did you get brought into this world of being super into economics, finance, and Bitcoin?
man, it's a really long and weird story. I was a middle of the road, sort of normal Scandinavian. I grew up. I was very anti-establishment on a lot of things, but it crystallized in specific ways. I was always fascinated by ideas and politics, and like help the poor. I was a big climate change guy for a long time. I went traveling. I had a couple of big trips, and after I graduated from high school 15 years ago. Um, and but the most important one for our conversation is that I went to Argentina for about a year in 2012, and I wrote about this on Stacker News recently. Do you know Stacker News?
I do. I actually have a AMA territory on there, so I work with them a lot, getting people on.
Nice, man.
Stack
Yeah.
News is
I just
awesome.
discovered it. I just discovered it a few weeks ago, and I've
It's
been
great.
putting out a lot of stuff there. And people just sap you for things. It's like Nostra on steroids. It's absolutely fantastic. So I wrote about the story a little bit. So I went to Argentina. Didn't know anything about money. Didn't know anything about financial systems. Didn't know anything about anything really. I was just big into climate change, and I like trees, and I was worried about the planet, and I thought we should help the poor, and government is good, whatever. Um, and during that year, two things changed. One was that there were all these things about the financial system and money itself that wasn't really working in Argentina in 2012. Like, it was much better than it had been before, and it was much better than the hyperinflation that it was going to get later, 5-10 years later. So they were having a good time, right? Which was 40% inflation. Like, that was amazing. So prices kept changing all the time, and I kept my money in foreign currency, and I just like had to go to the ATM all the time. And I got more and more pesos every time, and I was like, "This is kind of weird. Like, why are the prices changing so much? Wait, it's all these questions that I've never asked before, never had to ask, because my financial system and money system was kind of working. They sort of like popped up, and they were daily nuisance, and I saw all these problems that I would later go on to study. like the problem of small change and the transaction cost of trying to do anything in an inflationary environment, how people are doing all kinds of wacky things to create savings, get their hands on dollars every which way. And so I was thinking about this a lot when I was there, but I was wrapped up in the climate change, and we need to stop all these evil fossil fuel people, polluters pay and stuff. So I was traveling there, and then I was studying Spanish, and then I was traveling. And during those travels, there was this moment when I was reading a Financial Times article. For some reason, a Financial Times article was in front of me, and I couldn't understand what happened. Like, I spoke decent English at the time, understood the words, no idea what was going on in the article. There were all these terms, GDP and stimulus spending and this thing and that thing. I'm like, what is this? What, like, this
it's
seems
a language
important.
of its own. Yeah,
It's a language of its own, right? And it seems important. It seems to have to do with these big things in the world, and I have no idea what was going on. So at that moment, I was like, okay, I need to study this. I was basically in between high school and university, trying to figure out what to do, what I was interested in and what I wanted. So I was like, okay, I need to study economics. All right, next step. I would like to study economics in English. It's very international. I love all this stuff. And then I was also starting to learn a lot about the economic past or economic history, like economic development. How did Sweden go from being one of the poorest countries in Europe to some of the richest and like highest standard of living? And so I was reading a lot of those things, and I realized that I need to study those things. So I found a university program two university programs in the UK that did economics and economic history together. And I thought, all right, that's great. I can get the theory and I can get the sort of application of like knowing where everything came from. So that was in Glasgow and at the London School of Economics. And I hated London. It was like a busy city, tons of people, ugly, smelly, whatever. I was like, okay, fuck it. Like, so
you're a
this
nature guy like me. I've been feeling
yeah,
that more and more about all the cities, no matter where they are in the world. They're all pretty similar. I
yeah,
am a man of nature for sure.
yeah, yeah. And it was so funny too, because at the time I was kind of like, I'd been living in Buenos Aires, like one of the biggest fucking cities in the world, and I kind of loved it. And I loved the heat, and I didn't mind, the Latin American 30, 40 degrees thing. Loved the beach, loved the like easy like shorts and t-shirt every day kind of thing. But anyway, so this thing came together, and I didn't want to go to London, so I just thought, okay, fine. Like, Scotland is cool. I come from a part of Sweden that has the same sort of edgy relationship to the center of their nation. Like, we speak very rough, and we have this like edgy Scottish tone to it. So cool, fine, whatever, I'll go there. So I study economics. So I started studying economics there, and I remember having this conversation with people. The entire first semester was just like definitions of things. Like, we weren't doing anything. There was no econ here. So I was kind of not exactly satisfied. And at the same time, I stumbled across Tom Woods, like one of my like Swedish guys who I followed a lot. He was on his podcast when he basically just started out. I was like, oh, okay. Like, he's associated with something called the Mises Institute. Okay, interesting. So I started reading things from the Mises Institute. And like, once you start seeing economics from the Mises Institute point of view and Austrian economics, then you're down a rabbit hole. Like,
There's
you're in
no
for a
going
ride.
back from there.
There's
Yeah.
no going back, right? So I completely mesmerized. So my second year of uni, basically during the summer there, I went to the Mises University for the first time, 2014, I think. And I was completely like, wow. There were all like hundreds of people who are like me and are fascinated and geeking out about economics, but they are not stupid and they don't talk about the ridiculous things that we had in class. So like, oh my God, this is me. I have to, wow. So then it was an entire uni degree. It was just like one big sort of, how can I bring this in? Like, I went straight back to my university library, right? And like looked up all the books by Mises and Rothbard, and they are standing there in a corner. Nobody's touched them for years. I was like, I got all of those and read them. And so I was basically doing double degrees, right? Like, I was doing my official degree, and I was also reading all the Austrian takes on things on the side. So fast forward a couple of years, I was a Mises research fellow in 2017. So I spent the entire summer there working on a paper on deflation and ideas about deflation. And I also got second in their annual competition And the guy who won is a good friend of mine, and he is now a professor at the university in Germany, I think. So he went full on the academic route. And that's what I thought. In 2017, that's what I thought I wanted as well. So I'd applied to a bunch of universities, and lo and behold, I got into Oxford. So I was like, wow, mesmerized by this. Like, I have to go to one of the most elite universities in the world. So I did. Spent 2 years there, or a year and a half there doing my master. And then, I was totally on the academic train. I was going to get into academia. I was going to get into a PhD program. I was going to work my ass off for 20 years, publishing articles and teaching students about economics and all the important things. And somewhere between, and then I got accepted by George Mason University. But in the meantime, I also took a year off in between, and I spent some time at American Institute for Economic Research, where I've been writing for a long time. We talked before we started recording about how many articles I have there.
So insane amount. Just for people's some reference here, I pulled up just one of his many site pages where you have your author page. There's 22 pages worth of full pages of articles. There's a ton.
Yeah. I haven't counted in a while, but probably published 500-600 popular articles. So not scholarly articles, but
and these are excellent in-depth articles about Austrian economics and the real things that people need to be reading. Yeah.
A lot of book reviews. I was reading like a maniac in 2020, 2021, and I wrote basically about every single book I read. Anyway, so something happened, and this is where we're getting in the story, right? Why are we here? What are we interested in? And all the things that you listed about carnivore and health and yoga and Bitcoin and things. Everything happened somewhere there. And I'm sure you're aware that there's some kind of internal transformation, I want to say. And it never happens. There's never a point, and it's always a gradual sort of process. And you're not entirely sure what happened. But somewhere between 2017, when I was mesmerized by being accepted to Oxford and going there, and I was like, wow, I have to do this. This is fantastic. I really want to do this. I'm at the pinnacle of academia. And 2019, when I got my offer to do a PhD in economics, and I was a little bit disgusted, and I don't want to go into a university. This environment is crap, filled with people I don't really respect. Sometimes I say, I have this one-liner that I say, the most important thing that I learned at Oxford was that you can have a PhD and still be an idiot. So that was basically, I learned a lot at Oxford. I love it. And it's a beautiful place. Has libraries beyond measure and every kind of resource you want. It's a beautiful place, but it's filled with a lot of, yuppies or people who trust the system a lot and who don't really think outside the box. Really clever, really intelligent, really hardworking, but a lot of idiots as well.
So that's so common for pretty much all these big fancy universities. I went to one here in the U.S. called the University of Washington in Seattle, and you just pretty much laid it out the same. Just beautiful campus, cherry blossom trees everywhere, huge fancy libraries that just look like they're out of a movie. And lots of people who mean really well. There's so many students who want to come in and change the world and have a great attitude about things, like you and I both did, but the underlying just theme of the school is just to give you all of the narratives that are passed down from the government. And especially in the economics class, like you said, I wasn't even thinking about economics really, but I took an Econ 101 class. I would love to look back at the textbook they gave us, because I am sure it was just talking about how amazing central banks are. They're so good for the economy. They stop, collapse or whatever. They smooth out whatever, and inflation is good for you. All this stuff is just pushed to all the students in every university out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think economics department might be the least bad, apart from real stuff like engineering or medicine or something. Even medicine maybe. But at least there are portions of a university campus that are kind of serious and they don't fuck around. But among the ones that do fuck around, economics might be the least bad ones. And then you have all the other ones. History was a mess, sociology, gender studies, literature, whatever. It's just nonsense. fire all of them, afuera, like Millet says, like just. Yeah. But then I also have this. So sometimes I say these like hyperbolic things, like there isn't going to be like higher education is not going to be a thing for our kids. Like in 20 years, they're all gone, because everything's happening online. We have this like Peterson Academy type things. You can learn whatever you want. And, like it's just a waste of money and time, and you'd learn much more from just like being in the world and actually producing value. But then again, Oxford has had teaching for something like 900 years. They withstand, everything, world wars, democracy, like kings dying. Like maybe it's hyperbolic to think that whatever we're going through is so much bigger that it's going to crush this long thing. Like probably not. But anyway, so I just so picking up our story there, I got very disillusioned with academia, and decided no, let's just go travel. Let's I can write. And I had been writing for Mises and AIR at that time, and they were paying me for it. So I was like, okay, I can write. Let's go to some wonderful place. I've been to Costa Rica way before, so I went to Costa Rica in 2019, and I was just writing my ass off. And I had some academic contact, and I was doing editing for academics or professors, editing their journal articles to make them fit into exactly the format, and making sure the typos were not, there were no typos in there and things like that. While I was writing as well. So fast forward a couple of years, I basically did this. Traveled from one place to the other, stayed with friends here and there. I went to the US, I went to Hungary. I was going to go to Spain, but then the pandemic made everybody stay at home instead. So I went to my family in Sweden. When things started opening up, me and two friends decided to go someplace, and we basically had a map. And everybody had different rules where we could go. Like, oh yeah, these guys don't allow people from here. These guys don't allow people from here. So we basically like settled eventually, like, oh, the only place we can all go to is Iceland. All right, we've never been to Iceland. Don't know anything about Iceland. Let's go. So we went to Iceland, and my jaw hasn't really like come back up yet. Like, it is such an astonishing place. Like I came here and like I just saw one crazy nature thing after another, and the thing I keep telling people is the air. The air is like crisp. And like it's peaceful and it's quiet, and there's something like I do this weird routine every night where I just like I open the window even in a storm, and I just take a couple of deep breaths just to like be reminded of the air that I'm in. Every time I come back, the first step out of the airport is always this magical experience, and it's just like one big breath, and it's like, wow, I'm home. So we were traveling, and then basically I was like, we came back home, and I was like packing my stuff and moved there. No questions asked. And remember at that point, like before then, I had been a big city boy. I liked academia. I didn't like the cold. I liked going to the beach. And now like all of that out the window. I'm going to like one of the coldest places and one of the most remote places. No academic, nada. Just nature and beauty. And then I kept like going like that. I stayed in the capital for a while, and then I didn't like it. So I went to the second biggest city, and then I still thought it was too big of a city. And now I'm in a tiny, tiny village at the edge of the world, and making my life here. So professionally, what happened after that was that I kept writing, and then I found Become Magazine, and I started doing editing for those guys, first for the online and then also for the print magazine. So I'm going to do some promo for the print magazine. There's an old issue. That is really, really nice, like beautifully illustrated magazine. For listeners, I'm just holding up an issue of the Bitcoin magazine print.
They're so well done. When I was in Nashville for the conference this year, I stayed at Bitcoin Park, which is like their big meetup spot, and they had a big stack of those magazines. So I kind of peeled off from like everyone was like socializing downstairs for like 30 minutes. I just went upstairs and just like looked through all these magazines. They're beautiful. They're really well done.
Yeah, fantastic. Like the girl who does the graphics is just incredible. Like beyond, like I don't even understand how they make all this shit. It's so wonderful. And yeah, my tiny little contribution is that I do copy editing. So all the typos and all the errors you find in there, blame me. And I've also been doing some book reviews for them in there as well. So I started doing that. And then I kept branching out. I was also writing on the side for Mises and AR, but less crazy as I did in the first couple of years. And then I worked with some other obscure author for her amazing book. So I was editor for Lynn Alden's Broken Money, that I'm holding up again for listeners.
Amazing. I still haven't
Fantastic.
read that. I need to.
My God.
And for
You're
listeners,
behind.
he's joking. Everyone knows Lynn Alden. If you don't, you're living under a rock.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually do. Because, like, all this other stuff, like all these other credentials, like, oh, yeah, I went to university, I studied economics, like, I went to Oxford, blah, blah, blah. None of it matters. Like, to Bitcoiners, you just like, okay, shut the fuck up. What have you done? You know, it's like, yeah, like, give me something real. It's like, yeah, I was the editor for Lynn Alden and she loved my work. I made sure that there was almost no typos and some of the research I improved on. You know, like, and they're like, oh, you worked with Lynn Alden? Yeah, I know. Fantastic. And then last year I was also editing Aaron's book, the Genesis book.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
If you've seen of that one, it traces the history of Bitcoin basically through the cypherpunks and things like that. Absolutely fantastic book. Lovely to work with Aaron, and he is now the editor-in-chief for Bitcoin magazine. So you can see the connections. So that's basically my long 15 minutes for 15 years of my life, and how I ended up at the edge of the world, and how and what I do for a living.
I love it, man. Thank you for sharing all that. There's so much to dig into there.
Yeah.
Firstly, just for all those books you rattled off, I'll put them all in the show notes because people need to check these out. These are awesome works by great people who really know what's going on in the world and are speaking truth to it. So it's powerful stuff. And I also love that, you mentioned how Bitcoiners don't care about your resume. They care about the proof of work. This is a big proof of work environment, and that's one of our mantras we like is if you just show us what you've done, and I'm sure you can just show them, your 22 pages of articles you've made and your writing that you've done. Have you ever thought about writing a book yourself? Is that in the?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's always thinking about that, and I've been asked this a number of times. I was sort of working towards one before I found out that Lynn was doing a history of money and on a monetary technology, basically. And I was like, darn it, that was what I wanted to do. And then so she has this amazing book, and like it's like I can't trump that, you know. So then for maybe a year after that, I wasn't working on anything at all. And I was like, well, whatever. I don't have anything interesting to say. Like the things I have to say are in short form. Like there's no need for a book for me. So we'll see how it goes. There is a lot of writing, and maybe I can put them together or something eventually. But I need, how Lynn has to. You haven't read the book, but for listeners who have, like Lynn has this like central thesis that the problem with current money is a mismatch between the technology of settlement and the technology of information, right? So you can send bank money instantly across the world, or instantly, like from the telegraph and onward, you can send information pretty fast across the world, but you can't send the physical bank settlement, which is gold. Like you still have to put it on a ship and then ship it, and it takes 6 weeks. So there is this mismatch between them, and that's why we got, the 20th century in terms of massive money or massive banking structures on top of base money. And all the problems of the 20th century, right, basically. And so she has this central idea that there's a engineering mismatch between the speed of settlement and things. But I'm still looking for a central idea that I could have. I don't know exactly what that would be. But yeah, I do write a lot about the beauties of money and what money does in the world.
Yeah, in one of my problems, like you mentioned, like I haven't read so many of these books. I need to, but I read so many of their articles. I've read so many of Lynn Alden articles, so I know enough about her to know that I already recommend it. But it's tough to really sit down and really grind through a whole book. But I need to get more into that. I need to shift maybe away from the short form articles and more toward the long forms, because those are really like the masterpieces of these big brains. And I have something in common with you here where I also love copy editing. I feel like that's something I'm pretty good at. And so I've helped a few people here and there. Alex Svetsky is a guy who I helped out. His recent book, The Bushido of Bitcoin, I helped editing with that. Had him on recently. Great. And like sometimes you just got to be humble and just know like this guy's like a bigger Bitcoin brain than me. I need to help support his big project. That is how I can provide the most value, make sure this is as awesome as possible. Because I can't write something that amazing. So like being in a support role is excellent too,
But you know how he always says we need some new kinds of Bitcoin books now? Like we've written the history of money. Basically, Lynn has written the history of money. Aaron has written the prehistory of Bitcoin.
Saifedean and the Bitcoin standard, great example.
Bitcoin
also.
standard and the fiat standard. I have his fiat standard here somewhere as well. Like those books reasoning about the money system has sort of been written, and every schmuck, like you go to Amazon and you search for Bitcoin books, you find all kinds of random schmucks you've never heard of who write basically similar things, like, oh yeah, fixed supply money, this thing, that thing, but not particularly eloquent and not particularly informed. Like that crowd, that scene seems pretty crowded. Like I could probably make one of those books given the knowledge that I have, but I don't know exactly what I'm bringing to the table here. And this is something that Svetsky says too, and that's why he was trying to write the Bushido of Bitcoin. That's taking like a bigger moral claim, like how to live on a Bitcoin standard, like what is good virtues on a Bitcoin standard, right? And Saifedean, I don't know if you saw that, but he preambled his new book, The Gold Standard.
Yes,
which is
exciting.
Fictional. Right? It's really exciting. He's doing counterfactual history.
This could be different for him. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I read a little bit from the extract, like 40 pages or so from a couple of chapters, and he is really writing it like a fictional story, like they're characters and they do things and they're like, shit, I'm doing this. And
no way.
Yeah. This is like a different take, right? Like this is like doing money or monetary analysis, but slightly differently. So I think you need, like, to stand out as a writer and author these days, I think you need something different. The Bitcoin space is becoming so big that you can't just write about Bitcoin. Yeah, you need a thing.
The bar is rising for sure.
The bar is rising.
And this is good.
And it's also expanding. Yeah. Like I'm working with a guy called Liam Wankham, who's basically been in Bitcoin Magazine, and he writes about real estate markets a lot. He's a real estate developer, and he writes about how real estate companies should have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and that should help them, financially speaking, through the process of building. Right. So that's like an angle, right? Like you can't just write about Bitcoin. You have to write about how Bitcoin does real estate. Or something like that, you know. You need or health, right? You know, like I know there are a couple of people out there trying to write books and manuscripts and articles about the intersection between health and Bitcoin. So I mean, you need some kind of angle now. You can't just write about money.
Yeah, the intersection of Bitcoin and health, I feel like, is such a huge opportunity. Like there's a few people that have done it. It's not like untouched, but there's just so much meat on that bone. No pun intended. You know, there's lots of carnivores in the Bitcoin world. And we didn't really, well, before we get into that, you know, just to throw out a few names, I'm sure you've heard of Matthew Leshak, Fiat Food, a great book. Had him on a podcast a while back. He is, I believe he is one of the most underrated voices in Bitcoin right now still. He just has such a great handle on how the food and health side is connected to the fiat system.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it.
I always love listening to him.
I'm going to read it for Christmas, so I haven't actually read it yet. But yeah, I'm aware of it, and I've heard him. Was he on, like, so he was on some big podcast, I think, but I've seen him a couple of times, like, giving the pitch.
He's been on most of the big ones now, but for some reason he still hasn't, like, really blown up, I wouldn't say. But he's just amazing. He's as good as anyone out there. Yeah. But speaking of that, we didn't really talk about your, like, health side of your story, the carnivore side. So what's that story? How'd you find this?
This one is slightly less obvious to me. I don't know exactly. I was, like, in echoing the previous, like, I was a climate change guy, and I thought those things were important. So obviously I was a vegetarian for a couple of years, and I tried all kinds of things, you know, vegan, raw food stuff. They don't last very long, and you fall off the wagon, right? So in 2017, more or less, I've been having a lot of, like, gastrointestinal problems. Every time I ate, my belly would just bloat up, and I would, like, a couple of times a month, I would have these instances where I had this, like, insane pain from eating something, and I couldn't stand up. And basically the only thing I knew what to do about that was to go for a long walk or a run. So I would, like, run through the park, like, half, like, crippled over, and couldn't really stand up straight because, like, my belly hurt so much. But I had to, like, get that out somehow. I had to move, whatever. And it never occurred to me that it was something that I was eating that was, you know, hurting me. I just ate, you know, normal food, bread and cereals and stews and whatever. Didn't really think much of yogurt. Didn't think much of it. And so I met this guy who was like we were having a lunch at an academic conference. And I asked him, like, oh, he was eating something different, and he was like, what are you eating? He's like, yeah, I'm on a paleo diet. This was, you know, 5-6 years ago when that was big. And I was like, what's that? He's like, yeah, so I used to have this gastrointestinal problems, and I would get bloating every time I ate. I was like, you kidding me? That's what I get every time I eat. So like we ditched the rest of the conference and just talked about our poop schedules for like 3 hours. And then I was kind of sold. Like I've never heard of anybody having this problem, and here I meet this guy who's like having this problem and has fixed it, and he's starting to eat something that helps him. It's like, wow, fascinating. I got to try this shit. And paleo leads to keto very quickly, especially when I noticed that there were a couple of things that made this happen, like high starch, high carb things like dates or other like very, very sweet fruits, and bananas used to, but not anymore. Like things like that were specific. Like I would eat a lot of those, and then I would get bloating 3 hours later. I'm like, aha, I got a connection there. So I really like fucking woke up from that one conversation, and I started experimenting a bunch of things. And then I was like way down there. I was doing keto for a couple of years, and then in 2021, I felt I was ready to take the next step, and I was like, okay, well, what if I get rid of all these other stuff like vegetables and fruits, whatever, and just do meat? What happens then? So I just did meat for like a year, and like within a couple of months, I did meat and eggs and butter and cheese. For more or less only that for, I don't know, 6 months, a year or something. And just like 2 months in, I started having muscles in places where I've never had muscles before. Like I did the same workout.
The same thing happen, like with no difference in exercise.
No difference. Yeah.
That same thing happened to me. It blew my mind.
Yeah. Like all of it's like I've done the same. Like I've done yoga for almost 10 years now. Went to the gym the same amount. Like lifted the same stuff, and like all of a sudden I had more energy. All of a sudden, like I had muscles in places I never like. I was like, you just shower and you just like touch somewhere. You're like, what the fuck? There's a muscle here, And it's like, wow, what is this? And at that point, you're just done, right? Like, like I'm not going back to bread and cereals. Having said that, since then, I'm a lot less radical than like back. So 2021, 22, I was like, will not touch something. You put a tiny bit of anything in somewhere, I will not touch it. But since then, I'm more like, whatever. And I usually don't have these like bloated stuff anymore. And I eat tons of eggs and tons of meat, and I've like gone down the entire like local farmer things. I get my meat from 2 farmers down the valley. And I really want to talk about the spirituality of this thing. I listened to your interview with Stephanie earlier today. Talking about
Dr. Rimka. Amazing. I love her.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it's like, I've been thinking about things like that for so long. I usually like, she's like a smart, hot shot, like amazing, has all the research, whatever. Me and my dumb little brain, I'm just thinking about, Avatar, the movie Avatar, and how they think about, interacting with the environment. And the entire like storyline there is supposed to be this like, oh, industrial society is bad and it's coming here to ravaging our beautiful nature. And then like a guy who's a warrior goes in there and he sees the beauty of nature and he changes his mind. But what I've always thought of there is, how the lady, the Avatar lady, whatever the character is called, she's like, when they kill an animal, they like pray to it. They sacrifice. Like even when they have to take a life, they're sad, right? But they do it because they have to. And she has this wonderful comment about him, like, you're like a child making noise and killing things, So that I'm thinking about a lot in the last few years, especially now that I get my meat directly from farmers. A couple of months ago, we were doing this Icelandic thing called Roundup, where they like collect all the sheep from the mountains and they like push them down basically to the farmers. And it was such a fantastic thing, like they took us out all the way to the peninsula here, like the remotest of remote places in a valley, like on the other side of that mountain. And we just like walk up and down the mountain with the sheep, collecting all the sheep, getting it to the farm. And then a week later, like they do their thing, slaughter, package the meat, whatever, and then I get meat. It's like, it was such a beautiful spiritual nature connection thing where you're just like, I helped move these sheep up the mountain. I know that they've been living in this beautiful valley for 6 months, 7 months, and had a wonderful life there. And now they're fat and fluffy, and we just pushed them up the mountain and they walked with us all the way down. And then they had one bad day, like Stephanie said in that podcast, where we slaughter them, and then they nourish me for a couple of weeks. It's like, and it's so wonderful, and it's this like spiritual dimension to it. It's like we're supposed to. That is like we're not sacrificing ourselves. We're not making harm on ourselves, like, or we won't. We refuse to make damage on ourselves in order so that an animal can live. Like we take this life and we do it willingly and painfully. Willingly, but at least in pain, just like the Na'vi in the Avatar movie. Like they take no pleasure in doing this. It's just a necessary evil. And then you get all this like beautiful meat. And now I'm always stuck up my freezer, and I have organ meat and everything in the freezer, 100 kilos at a time. So that was basically the meat story. Now I'm pretty much like, eat the meat, but I also I'm much less radical about things. So if my girlfriend makes a stew with potatoes, or she made yams for Thanksgiving, it's like, I'll eat that stuff.
Yeah, I think that people probably think that I'm like super radical because when I, am recording podcasts about this, I have a different perspective on just like where the toxicity should come from in our content. Like, I think that the truth should be clear and known, and there should be no fluffiness around the truth, which is carnivore is the best there is. No plants is the best. It's a perfect health track. And you mentioned Stephanie Rimka. I think she has a really good illustration of this. She's done videos on this before, of like this target graphic where the closer you go to the bullseye, the better your health is going to be. And like you said, paleo is the gateway drug for so many people. It goes paleo, keto is a little better than that, carnivore is a little better than that, lion diet's the best. That's the ultimate like peak human diet, the cleanest you can have. And so I just want that to be completely clear. But like you said, I'm home for the holidays right now. Like, I may slip up and have like a cookie or something here and there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
These are health sacrifices for momentary pleasure. It is a high time preference activity. We know this from Bitcoin. And I say the less of those you make, the better. And my hat comes off to people who are 100% perfect. Like, there are people out there who just say, I'm never touching any of that ever because my health is so important to me. I'm never going to, do these things for short-term taste. And that's amazing. And I do think I will eventually be there. And I do go through long periods of that sometimes. If I just, am really on a health kick, I'll absolutely do it. I think that when I become, a husband and a father and like have my own like house with like my freezer full of beef, that is going to be the time where I want to be perfect and like really show perfection to my family and like be a good example. But at this time where I'm still traveling a lot, I'm home and my parents are they eat so many sugary junk things everywhere. It's tough to be perfect all the time, and we have to like understand like sometimes we can't be perfect, but like you said, you learn so much about yourself just by going down this path and understanding which things affect you. And so like all that I want everyone to know is that, this is what perfect is. And if you want to move around a little bit outside of that, that's totally fine. Like, you do you. I just get pissed off when people go on the internet and start making up stories like sourdough bread is good for you. Like, I still see so many Instagram stories of people, talking about how, like, oh, the fiat bread at the American stores is full of toxins, it's really bad for you, but sourdough is really good for you. And I come in and say, fuck no, it isn't. No bread is good for you.
Like,
this
but
is bullshit.
I mean, it's like, given the choice, right? If I have crappiest white bread I can find in a supermarket and sourdough, and I have to eat something, I'm gonna go with the sourdough. It's like there is some kind of great. I don't think they're wrong that sourdough is better than that shit. I just think they're missing the point.
Better.
Like they could just eat meat and then your problems go away. And it's like you can, like, at some level you can sort of feel this. I don't know if you feel this in your body too, or maybe we are the weirdos who feel that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this on eating like this. But like when I eat sourdough or like some other stuff like that, half an hour, 20 minutes later, I feel heavy. I feel bad. I'm tired. I have no energy. Like, ugh. I kind of want to go take a nap, whatever. But then, if I eat a steak or I eat eggs or I eat whatever, then I'm just like elevated and happy, and like
it literally gives you more energy.
You feel good. Like it literally, like it gives you instant fucking feedback. Or like the next day or what, you're like, you notice what your body is doing. And maybe this is just a transformation that happened, like when I was 10, 15 years ago, when I didn't think about these things. Maybe I never noticed what my body was doing, and I wasn't like, all this is connected in that sense, right? With the health space and the spirituality and the yoga. And like now I'm very, very in touch with what my body is doing. And I think about what my body's doing a lot, and I pressure and value my sleep and the light and all that sort of thing. But I didn't before. And I always wonder if this is like, is this a universal thing that everybody has? They just forgotten? Or are we the weirdos out here who, we're the ones who started thinking about these things, and for the ones who try eating meat, but it doesn't resonate with them, they just go back to not thinking. Like, I don't know what's going on here. And I'd love to hear more from like all these smart people that you've been interviewing, and things like that. But it feels so basic to me. Like, people fucking feel what the food is doing, right? like what's going on.
But some people are just so like full of poison on a consistent basis that they can't even track this stuff anymore. Like, their body is so whacked out, and they're on drugs to just suppress the issues. And so, like, I think that there's definitely a gradient, like you said, of there are influences out there talking about animal based and single ingredient foods. And I definitely think for the majority of the population, that is a huge improvement, So I think that those people are doing a net good for the masses. But at the same time, I have even more respect for the folks out there like Dr. Anthony Chaffee, who really just talks pure carnivore. And he explains why even those people are not there yet. And, just what the peak North Star is, if you want to just clear all that shit out. And just go straight to the best. Just like, so many of us go through the crypto phase before Bitcoin. Like, is crypto better than fiat? I mean, it's still garbage. And so I don't know, like, maybe it's a little bit better because it starts getting you to think about things more. It gets you a little bit closer to the truth. But I would rather just pull people straight from fiat into Bitcoin so they can just not waste all their time like I did, spending years, thinking that crypto is amazing when it's really just another flavor of nonsense. Where there are full truths in the world, there are like hard truths, and the end game is clear for certain fields. And like we would say, for the monetary end game, we'd say is Bitcoin. The dietary end game is carnivore. So like, if there's some people like helping people through the very early levels to higher up, cool. I'm going to focus on the people who are bringing people to the very end right away, and that's the people who I try to bring on the podcast. Like Dr. Rimka is not talking about, like fruit and honey are, good in moderation. Like, no, she's saying just eat meat.
Right.
People like her are a good example.
Yeah. I mean, I've sort of gone back. I guess I'm a little heretic there, and because I listened to Paul Saladino when he said, honey and fruit is fine, and then I started incorporating some honey and fruit, and I felt fine on it. Like, so I still have honey in my tea, and I eat bananas now and again, especially when I'm doing hard workouts, things like that. And I also take a lot from like Wehrman and from like what's his face, Peter Attia, the book Outlive, and they are not carnivore by any stretch of the imagination, right? They just like eat good and try to think of their health a lot, and they know a shit ton about those things. I guess I'm a little heretic in that sense, that I can be happy about that. I had two questions here. Like one thing, like, did you have, so when I was in my carnivore, early in my carnivore, and I was doing a lot of these workouts, I have this, I used to have this like ammonia thing. When I do a lot of hard workouts, my sweat would all smell like ammonia. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I had it explained to me that apparently, so this is something that happens a lot to people on carnivore. When they do hard workouts and they don't get enough fat, so like even if they don't hit 70% or more, and they're doing hard workout, apparently the body starts using the protein for energy. There's just not enough, and they just like use whatever they have. So break down the proteins, blah, 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 something to do with ammonia. Chemically, someone much smarter than me can explain how this works. Glyconeogenesis or something. And
gluconeogenesis.
One of the byproducts of that is ammonia, so then your sweat stinks like ammonia. And like what I was told then was just to eat more fat. But when you're at 73% fat already of your calories, it's really fucking hard to push that number higher without having more. Like, you can't eat a steak because the proportions are too wrong. Like, you get too much protein for the fat. So you need to like fucking chug heavy milk or heavy cream or something. Like, it's just really impossible to get there. So that was sort of a turning point. And I remember at the same time Paul Saladino was doing his carnivore to fruit and honey phase. I was like, okay, I trust this guy. I like this guy. He's taught me a lot about the body and meat and vegetables. So let's go with it. So I started putting honey in my tea, and started eating bananas and some other like fruits that didn't annoy me. And all of a sudden this thing goes away, right? Because there's carbs in your system that you can sort of use. So it's like, yeah, I guess I'm not carnivore technically speaking, and there's this battle between brains who are much smarter than me. But my sweat doesn't smell like ammonia anymore. So, like, there's clearly something, like, again, the feedback with the body, your body tells you what's going on. Like, everybody realizes that your sweat smelling strongly like ammonia is not a health, like, something is going on, like something is wrong. So yeah, that was what I was wondering, if you knew about this, if you heard you had similar reactions or like bad reactions to what your body's doing in the carnivore.
I never did, and I would also just kind of echo what you're saying there. Like, there's so many smarter people out there than me. I'm just kind of a middleman. I would say Anthony Chafee, he does Q&As on his Twitter and YouTube all the time. That would be a perfect one to just pop in and just ask him that question.
Check it out for sure. Yeah.
Bart K is another guy I had on recently. He's extremely smart on this stuff. And I think that the short answer would be it is always some sort of macro thing, like the fat and the protein are mixed. I mean, if you do believe in the just sort of the human evolutionary path, there were periods where if you look at fruit and honey in history, in our ancestral history, those were only available for a couple of weeks out of the year. Yeah. At least the fruit. I'm not sure about the honey, but the fruit was only available for like 2 weeks before winter as something to eat to fatten up. So we should not need that. Yeah. There should be some other thing that can be fixed somewhere. And I don't know if this could potentially be a clue, but you mentioned like having organs in the freezer. I know that that's what's happened to Paul Saladino when he, had his problems with carnivore. Was he was just pounding down way too much liver and organs, right? Because those have like an extremely high percentage of very specific vitamins in an unhealthy dose. Actually, like liver is extremely high in vitamin A, so you can get hypervitaminosis, and it starts causing problems. Like he saw problems, and he talked about them on the internet and said like, oh, when I just started eating mango and pineapple, these problems went away. What he didn't say is that that's because these carbohydrates block nutrient uptake. So he was getting too much of those specific vitamins. Yeah. He ate the carbohydrates that blocked nutrient uptake, and the problem subsided. Now, like, there's different ways of looking at this. To me, it just says, bro, just get rid of the poisonous shit that you're putting. Stop eating all these organs. That's not natural. That's not what our bodies are made for. No. And there's a reason why throughout history we would give the organs to the dogs usually, and maybe in very specific cases they can be useful. Like, I know that it's very common for people with hypothyroidism, with thyroid problems, to have a little bit of liver can be helpful, because having an extra boost in vitamin A can be helpful for them. But having liver every single day is very rarely a good thing. It can cause issues. And I don't touch any organs for that reason. I just think that, from my research, just simply sticking with muscle, meat, and fat is perfect, and that's what we're supposed to be doing.
So much there's so many nutrients in them, like that there's so much, like, and again, like, feel what happens to your body. Like, I can eat a kilogram of steak, I can eat a kilogram of ground beef, but after 200 grams of liver, I'm satiated. Like, I'm done, like, okay, I'm done. Like, I can't explain this in a scientific way. Like, my background is economic history. I know how to do numbers and econ. I can't explain the biology of things, but it just feels easier to, like, you get enough, right? And my understanding is that they're so nutrient dense and there's so much in them. So just like a couple of times a week now and again, like, it just really, really adds to some of the minerals and the vitamins that you might want.
Yeah, and I've never really experimented with them myself, so I can't speak from experience. At some point, if I see them out there and they're available, I might try, see what happens. But from the stories I've heard, and this is really the the perspective I bring is I've just listened to a shit ton of people's stories and, listen to these doctors. I'm not sure if you heard the whycarnivore.com page on Nostr. That's
No?
like one of my little side projects. I made a huge website just full of
Okay.
people's testimonials of healing all these different health
Oh,
problems with
wonderful. Yeah.
carnivore. And this is sort of what I've accumulated just from that,
Yeah.
not scientific enough to explain. This would be a Dr. Chafee question. He understands the body
Yeah.
like insane. Did you listen to my podcast with him?
I don't think so, no, but I've listened to
Oh,
him in the past a lot,
dude, that's probably my favorite episode I've ever done.
Okay, yeah.
This
Yeah,
guy
I'll go
is
back and look at it.
unbelievable. His brain is just mind-boggling to me. He just basically that's the episode I'm sure I've said the least words out of every episode because I just ask him like a simple question. He will just rant for like 30 minutes and just unload so much information that it's just unbelievable. Like I've gone back and listened to that one several times. I hear something new every time.
Yeah. So here's my other question, right?
Yeah.
Like what do you think is the overlook? Why are so many Bitcoiners carnivore? Like what's the overlap between these ones? They seem on their face to be completely separate spheres. Like they don't seem to have anything to do with one another. Like why do you think there's such a massive overlap?
That's a great question, and one that I love exploring so much. I think it really just comes down to once you go through one big rabbit hole that teaches you that everything you once believed on like a very ubiquitous thing was completely wrong, then you get hungry for more.
Yeah.
The rabbit hole diving is addictive, and I am definitely in that boat myself. When I started this podcast, it was originally going to be all about Bitcoin, but just a few weeks after my first episode in August 23, like September 9th, I think was when I started carnivore for the first time. And I just, I just heard enough enough Bitcoiners rather say that they did carnivore and they believed in it. And Saifedean was the guy who kind of pushed me over the edge, like a lot of other people. I remember I saw him, saying some similar things that I'm saying now, way back then, just going on these like animal-based people who are saying like, oh, like fruit is good for you. If anyone says fruit is bad, they're crazy. And Saifedean would go in there like, no, I'm just gonna fucking eat steak every day. Fruit, it's just sugar. It's just sugar. You're addicted to sugar and shut up. Like he just goes after people like that. I love it. I love his style of just not giving a fuck. No. And so I had read the Bitcoin standard and the fiat standard at that point and just thought like this guy is so dialed into so many things. I think that I should give this one a look because, he just keeps batting 1,000. And we're all of us Bitcoiners, I think, are going to start noticing this trend soon as the Bitcoin price keeps rising. Our families and friends and social circles are going to start realizing, oh shit, this crazy Bitcoiner friend was right about this. So maybe we should try some of the other things he's talking about.
Yeah.
And so like they help each other in that way. There's a lot of trust involved. There's a lot of like the social aspect of, when as a certain field is awakening and gaining notoriety for being correct about things, the more like they tend to be the type of people that have digged through other things too and found other truths out there, like Saifedean, for example, finding carnivore. I sort of latched onto him. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in that aspect, and trying to bring all the other people on the podcast that have also done these things. And Matthew Leshak's an example of one of those people who really fuses them together in a condensed way for people to understand. And it's just it's really beautiful because people are just awakening in so many ways right now. And the fact that we have such easy ways to communicate all of this and share this information amongst ourselves, it just speeds everything up. It's kind of hard to really track exactly where things happen, And one of the things you mentioned way earlier too was sometimes you just end up at these things and you don't even know how. Like you remember how you found carnivore from that friend at the conference. I don't remember how I found Dr. Anthony Chafee's podcast, but that was the thing that got me over the edge. I think someone shared it with me on Nostr or something. But for me, like I had that, the priming from hearing Saifedean talk about meat all the time and Jimmy Song and lots of other Bitcoiners, talk about this. But someone somewhere, and I think it was Nostr, got me onto Dr. Chafee's podcast. And I just started episode 1 and just started listening through, and I was just completely sold. And like weeks later, I decided to do it.
So do you
So
think it's just a distrust in the system, kind of like distrust in authority? Like here are all these health experts who are fat and ugly and die from heart attack at 61, right? And they tell you to eat fruits and stay away from red meat. And then you have the same people like running the central banks. Fair enough, Powell does look pretty good. Like for his age, he seems fine. But I was thinking about the other guy. I think he's at the Bank of International Settlements,
oh
the one
yeah,
who's all
what's
the
that just
memes all the game.
super fat dude over
Yeah, the
there? Yeah.
Mexican dude, like ginormous, right? And he tells you about about the banking system and how you should stay away from the evil Bitcoin and have the CBDC, whatever. Like you're just like I'm not going to trust you. I think I'm not going to take your word for this. Do you think that's like the just anti-teenage rebellion thing? That's what's going on. Like, and if that's the case,
Yeah.
like, where else? Like, shouldn't we reject absolutely everything and overcorrect? Like, certainly the yuppie elite. I was reading this article, like, amazing article by Jesse Myers a couple of years back. I was just rereading it a few days ago. Why the yuppie elite will never get Bitcoin. And he has this like dimension about intelligence and distrust in the system. But if you distrust the system, you should distrust a lot more than just what they eat and what they tell you about money. Right? Like I don't know what else to go with, but like I will stop using electricity because fuck you. Like they use electricity. I'm not going to use electricity. Like why are we? It's like I don't think Bitcoiners run around and say things like that, right? They say carnivore very specifically, like meat, stop eating the fiat food, and they say don't touch the fiat money, right? Like the fiat money's bad, does all these things, right? Maybe there's one or two other things along the like it would seem. So I guess scientifically speaking, it's like an underexplained. Not enough to say there's just a distrust in authority and in the system.
Yeah, that's a great point and great question. I just did an episode recently. I'm not sure if you've heard this guy. He's pretty low key still, but I'm trying to give him some more attention. His name on Nostr is Dr. Bit Meow. He's a dentist who is really into Bitcoin and carnivore. I don't know if you heard my episode with Kevin Stock way early on, but he's also like a carnivore promoting dentist. And so I talked with Dr. Meow, his pseudonym, about if you could get someone through one rabbit hole first as like the core foundational rabbit hole, would it be the money rabbit hole or the health rabbit hole? Because there's points for both of them. The point for health is that once you are really healthy and your brain works better from eating a great diet and implementing all these powerful like methods, then everything just opens up for you and you can explore all these other ones. But on the other hand, the case for the Bitcoin rabbit hole for me is that it really exposes the fiat system. It teaches you that every single one of these institutions in our society truly is full of shit because fiat just inverts the truth in that way, where the people gain the power who just lie the most and want to profit off of sickness and death. And so every single thing that comes down out of that is going to be literally the opposite of the truth. And so this is why people are so confused and just thinking like, how can the truth be the actual opposite of what's being told by all these very powerful, the media institutions, the doctors, etc. But I think this is a good question. I think that those are the top two. Those are the two biggest ones, are the health and the money.
Yeah.
And what was your original question?
It's like, what's the connection there? What's the drive? I have a hard time with explanations that go, there are evil men in a dark room conspiring to set this shit up. The Illuminati is fucking with us. Like, I don't really buy explanations like that. Maybe there is some like weird selection thing going on that the bad rises. Like in politics, you can explain this with the worst rise to the top. Okay, fine, because you have to be like cutthroat to make it in politics, and like people with very flexible morals are the only ones who make it there. If you want power, you don't deserve it, or something. So that one I can sort of explain in selection, but I can't I don't know what's going on here and why it is that there's this overlap, and I really want to sort of, or at least have a working hypothesis Like people keep asking me, it's like, why do you think everything is broken? It's like, yeah, why the fuck do I think everything is broken? Like, where does it come from? Who did it? Like, if something is broken, again, Lynn, broken money. Who broke it? Like, broken is past like passive tense, or at least the description of something. You know, like who broke it? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I know a good story for it, and I don't know if anybody has a good story for how all of this thing came
I
together.
think it comes down to my favorite word in the English language, which is incentives,
Mm,
because I think that explains so much. I think that maybe in the early days, like when the Fed was created, for example, the Federal Reserve, and let's bookmark that because I'd love to just get sort of your historical view on the money system because that's where you really thrive. But I think that in
yeah,
the early days, there were more of those, quote unquote, like dark room deals where these evil
yeah,
people decided, let's make this devious plan where we get to print all the money, you know. And I think there is likely less of that now because these systems were put in place, but now the system itself is so uh, built in such a way and just so ossified in such a way that it attracts these people that don't care about, I guess, virtuous things. Like politicians now are all very self serving because they know that the system is going to allow them to print unlimited money for themselves and their families. They can pardon their families for all the crimes that they're doing, as
yeah,
we're seeing on both sides. And there's a lot more self-servingness, and this also works at the corporate level too. They're getting up there and they're no longer incentivized to create good services for the world. They just have to, make the right friends in Congress to give bribes to and lobby to. And so that's a good example of the system. When you put those people in that system, it makes sense that they're making the choices they do because that power is there for them. And so what the solution to me is really just removing these over powerful options for these people, which always comes down to the money. And this is why, like, I think the money is the root cause, the Death Star, if you will, of all of these other things, including health,
yeah,
because you know when money is thrown around at that level and it can be printed by the very top, you're going to get this dynamic where there's a bunch of second tier superpowers just like clawing at the money printer and trying to get free money because it's way more profitable than actually you know having a free market solution that people uh, that works for people.
yeah. Yeah, lots to say about that. Like Bitcoiners definitely overdo this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been trying. Like this is something that really annoyed me with Safe's previous book, with the fiat standard, where he was talking about all sorts of things that fiat ruins. And like I was like pulling my hair and I was screaming and things reading it. And it's like this is so obviously incorrect. Like I've had to eat. It siphons into your mind a little bit because I have to eat.
You don't mean the
Except
book was incorrect, but like the things that people are fed in the fiat
No,
world,
I
right?
think actually like a lot of the stuff that he says was too like he just thinks
Oh,
money is
really?
everything, right?
What
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
disagree with from that?
I have a couple of articles on American Institute for Economic Research called the Daily Economy, where I sort of like review this book like very harshly, two or three things. Like he just thinks everything is money. He's just very unclear about it. There was another thing, like not to attack him specifically, but Jimmy Song has a wonderful book called Fiat Breaks Everything, Fiat Ruins Everything.
Fiat ruins
Yeah,
everything. Mm-hmm.
and it's the same thing. Like there's at least one article in there, like one chapter in there that was just like the numbers just don't add. Like he just thinks the entire federal government is money printing, and it's like even if you assume like the profits from money printing is kind of tiny, and they don't accrue specifically to the federal government. Like most of the things that the federal government is taken in taxes and fees to the like overwhelmingly. Even if we assume that the treasury market and the way that the US government can run a deficit, such a massively deficit, even if we like count all of that as money printing benefits, it's still only like 1/3 of the US budget. So like however you slice it, like even if I steel man the argument that money is driving this thing, you still have 2/3 of taxation running the shit. Like that I can't really like get an argument about like the monetary system is crooked to be informative for what is tax raising and tax money doing. Like then I need a story of democracy or the state or some like normal political economy thing. I have like so I was really sort of critical of Safe's book when it first came out, but then like it itches in your head, right? And then when I went to a couple of places in Europe this summer, in Prague and in Budapest and some other places, I was looking at the architecture. So he makes this argument about architecture, fiat architecture. I think Jimmy Song probably does too. When they're talking about how fiat, we used to have beautiful buildings under gold standards and whatever, these beautiful ornamental things, and then under fiat we have these crappy like shoebox type apartments that are just like awful. And I was walking around these cities and thinking about this. It's like, yeah, shit. Look at all this beautiful 19th century stuff. Look at all this beautiful, like, and then modern shit is just crap, right? So like, maybe I gotta come around to this argument a little bit. But anyway, so what I wanted to say is that I think people overestimate how much like the profits of money printing benefits a government. And either way, the health people, like I can't tie it to the health people. I'm happy to be wrong here. I would love to be wrong here. But like the health people are the incentives for like the FDA or others isn't exactly money, unless you want to say again that there are guys in a dark room, big pharma in a dark room trying to profit of people, and it's possible. But they get paid from the treasury or like from the federal government in some sense, right? I don't think their pay is directly influenced by the money printer in some sense. So yeah, I don't really put these things together. And yeah, with the incentive thing that you mentioned, like generally, yeah, it's a nice economist thing to look at the incentives, but the incentives go both ways. You always have the incentives on either side. So that's a normal thing that I think about when I have conversations with people who are very critical of markets, like Marxists and other social democrats and things who think markets are really evil. It's like, oh yeah, the incentive for rich people to do things. Yeah, but it's like, oh, this law got passed because there's incentive on lobbying for this thing. Okay, but there's incentive on the other side too. Like every law has, every lobbying industry has a counterparty. For every industry that wants a soda tax, there's a soda industry that doesn't want it, and there's money and incentive on both sides. I just don't think it's all of this comes down to who can throw most money at things and who can make the largest incentive. That just doesn't seem correct to me. So that's what I was thinking.
I have a book recommendation for you, my friend.
Yes,
this is one I have read. We talk about all these other ones that I have stacked up in my reading list I haven't read.
Yeah.
The one that I think would be absolutely perfect for addressing these questions is The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. Have you heard of that?
I love that one. Yeah, I love that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that and Matthew Leshak's Fiat Food, because Fiat Food is, I'm sure you may know, it's sort of an offshoot of the Fiat Standard. So that's kind of taking that chapter that he read in Seyfedin's book, and he had the exact same view of like, this doesn't seem right. This seems like too big of a stretch.
Yeah.
And so he really dove into that specifically. So I think that book is going to be absolutely perfect for, for the question you have there, and like seeing if that changes your mind or if you're still in the same boat on that, because that's an interesting view. That's definitely kind of like against the Bitcoiner track for most people. So I definitely sort of am in that camp of just like everything is a money printer's fault, just because like I think so much of it is, like that. It's a little bit simpler, and I think that that's a good North Star to like feed the normies. It's like understanding this is the root problem.
Yeah.
And then people who are, more well versed in the technicalities of it, like you can actually really break down the numbers, slice up that pie, and figure out, here's the actual statistics on, where who gets blamed for what more,
I don't know. I think about this a lot, and Bitcoiners definitely annoy me in this sense that it's like you just throw this money print. It's like that's not enough. That's not an explanation. So the example I want to go to is there's a Canadian guy called Seb Bunny who wrote a book that I forgot what the title is, but I have it up here, or somewhere in my library, anyways. And so I reviewed this book, but I read this book and I read the book, didn't like it at all, and I was like, this guy does not understand the monetary system. He doesn't understand finance. Everything is just a sleight of hand between money and income, basically. And he doesn't really make that distinction clear. And then I listened to him on what Bitcoin did, and I was like, yeah, I agree with everything this guy just said. Like, he's right when he talks about it, but when he puts it down on paper, he like cracks it up to the money printer without actually explaining. So one thing that I had like in the book specifically that he was talking about a lot was like, oh yeah, look at all these things that we could do if we had more income. Like the money system ruins us because we don't have enough income. But income doesn't have anything to do with money, really. Like you can have high income in a bad money or high income in a good money, right? Like the monetary system doesn't really cue for that. So all the things that he was talking about, it's like, oh yeah, my parents couldn't be home with me, or my mom couldn't be home with me as much as she would have liked to, and this thing happened, and this thing happened in the world, and this is bad for society because we don't have enough income, and all those things. And again, I was like, this is not a money, unless you think that being on a Bitcoin standard or a gold standard increases everybody's income by a shit ton. A weird argument, but fine. Then it doesn't show, like that's not what you're saying. You're talking about income, not money, right? So I usually get really annoyed by this with Bitcoiners when they're like just like it seems to be this like unicausal one thing. I just throw the money printer in there and then I win. Like no, we have to explain how. Like when it has to do with like the deficit or inflation or the creation of a financial crisis, we have a bunch of ways that you can do that. But you can't just say, well, the money printer fucks up health. Okay, well, walk me through exactly how that happens, right? Yeah, they financed Big Pharma. Okay, but Big Pharma was there anyways, and they don't need a money printer to operate. They have profit margins, right? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, you can't just. It needs to be more. Maybe it's a nice sort of entry story for Bitcoiners, and then they can start thinking about things really. But that is definitely one thing, that I do take issue with. It's like, come on, like explain it properly. You can't just say money printing for whatever problem you don't like.
You need to just start reaching out to these guys and getting on some calls with them, man. I think that, I mean, you mentioned Jimmy Song and Safety, and they both have podcasts. So this would be a perfect one. You should reach out and just say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. I have some agreements, some disagreements. Let's hash it out. Because it's a little above my pay grade to go that deep into it. I would love to hear you guys hash it out. I think that'd be great.
I have some book reviews of all of their books, I think, in print or in Bitcoin Magazine print or at the Mises Institute or some other publications where I have written about it. And again, I'm not the most eloquent speaker and debater and whatever, and my mind doesn't work that fast. I know, like Elon Musk sometimes jokes. Oh, even Saifedean did too in the introduction of his gold standard book. He was joking that his mind works faster than his mouth, and so he doesn't he doesn't always get all his things out. And I usually say the opposite, that my mind doesn't work as fast as I need time to think through. So like in a conversation and whatever, I might not do particularly well and think through. So I don't know. I've always thought of writing as being my medium instead of podcasts and debates and things like that. But,
well, let's bring back what we were talking about earlier, dude. We were talking about, what is your book going to be about? Maybe you could make a book just breaking down all the things you think Bitcoiners are wrong about.
Yeah.
How about that? That'd be the spicy one.
Bitcoiners are wrong on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like a collection of. It doesn't even have to be like a straightforward novel. I still think that if you could compile, enough of a collection of like these big books that you've read by big Bitcoiners, it could be a really short book of just like a few of the books and like your breakdown of them in like a long form way and how you have a different view on it, because that's such a good example of something that Bitcoiners really appreciate. Like this community loves harsh feedback and people saying that we're wrong about stuff. Like we said earlier, anyone that's been down this rabbit hole is very used to questioning everything and realizing they're wrong about a lot of things. So I'm at the point now where it's my favorite thing to be told that I'm wrong on something, because that means there's a rabbit hole to be dug through there. And so if you could like bring it all together and sort of, just synthesize those ideas out for people, I think that'd be a hit.
Yeah, it's a little bit what I'm doing at Stacker News now when I post these. I have these things called money classes, and I try to post like 3 or 4 a week. And they're very low key, very forum like. They're shorter than an article usually, and they're much more like informal and not as like formal, like not as properly formulated and whatever than an actual article would be. So I think some like what you mentioned is a little bit what I'm doing, like teach Bitcoiners about money and all the ways that they're wrong about money. And I do these in kind of short forum posts, and the people at Stacker News seem to like them because I get zapped a lot all the time. So that seems to be working. Maybe I'll put that together into some kind of collection at some point.
Yeah, I think that would be a super fun track to go down, just being sort of the bad guy, and just like trying to point out where people are wrong about things in your view and opening up that dialogue. I think
Yeah, I
that would be
also
super
think that
cool.
there is an overlap between economists and Bitcoin. It's like usually it's like, oh yeah, economists are fiat, they don't understand the Bitcoin system, and economists don't really understand the Bitcoin. Like shit, economists say about Bitcoin can fill a library, right? Like they just like garbage. So there is some sort of overlap there where there is a way to explain Bitcoin using proper economics, and some of the ways there. I don't know exactly how to do that. If I could make one recommendation, it's there is a professor called Josh Hendrickson who co-hosts a Substack called Economic Forces. He writes about. He's at the Bitcoin Policy Institute now as well, I think, or maybe he was. Well, listeners will Google where he's at. Josh Hendrickson, anyways. He has an article out now, 40 pages or something, on Bitcoin for economists. Basically, I forget the title of the actual thing, but it's like he's like pushing back against the economics profession, uh, all the stupid ways in which they think about Bitcoin. It's like, no, actually, economics does say certain things about money. Here, from a sort of mainstream economics point of view, not a raw Bitcoin thing. So I mean, there are some voices like that out.
Yeah, and this is why it's important for the people who can be bridges between different sorts of minds. I think that's like a really powerful and important person to have out there, and why I always recommend anyone out there who feels like they're too dumb to be an expert on anything, which is me, to just come out and just start talking about these things, and start podcasts, or just start putting out content on Stacker News or Nostr and asking questions, and just being that sort of glue between all these big characters and experts out there that are talking about these things. We need to have like the real people sort of filling in the spaces as well, because a lot of times when you go down these different expert tracks, and really focus in on something, it can actually block out your view of some other things,
Yeah,
and so I think that is where people can come in and help, is just like helping those people like open their mind, because these people are like becoming more and more open to like the community decentralized aspect, like a random example, but we see people on Nostr like Ken Berry come out there,
yeah,
and he's super active on there. He's responding to people everywhere. He's reposting people. He's following people, and you don't see that on any other platforms from him. Like I followed him on all the other
mm,
ones, but he has too big of a following in these other places. He has like hundreds of thousands or millions of people on YouTube,
yeah.
um, and so like a lot of these people, find the people who are open to just being part of the community and also learning and going through rabbit holes themselves.
But
And I think that
do you think
it's a,
do you think that's just a nature of Nostr and Bitcoin world in general, that it's so small? Like we haven't taken over the rest of the world yet, so it has this if everybody on Twitter migrated to Nostr tomorrow, do you think a lot of this goes away?
first of all, the nature of Nostr would be a great book title, but I
Nice, yeah.
I think part of it is that, well, definitely the fact that it's smaller is definitely going to help that engagement part, because you kind of have that vibe of you're like a small club and you're like the very first to be here, and it's exciting. But I think that even when it grows and when it takes off, it's going to be a much better place for that sort of thing, because on places like Twitter, sticking with Ken Berry as an example, um, you know, so many people respond to his posts and ask questions and things, and it just takes time to connect with people. Now on Nostr, it still takes time, but you get zapped for it. People
Mm,
zap you for your content,
yeah,
so it pays off for someone with a big audience to actually go through and respond to people,
yeah,
and because there's a culture of zapping for value, so people, when he gives a really good response to someone's question, he'll get zapped. He gets paid for it. So
yeah,
that really changes the incentive structure. And that's another thing with Dr. Bit Meow I talked about, is he goes on Nostr and he answers people's questions about dentistry and oral health. And I haven't actually looked at it myself, but I think he just frames it as like, hey, like shoot me your questions. and I'll be zapping the good ones and answering them, and it's kind of just implied like this is a value for value exchange. Like
Yeah.
if I'll give you, I'm happy to be here. I'll be here all day. It's like an AMA style. Like I'll answer all your questions, shoot me some zaps if you feel you got value out of it, and so it gives a perfect uh, platform for these people to really connect with their user bases and get paid for it, which I
Yeah.
think is huge. Another reason why Nostr is so amazing. There's so many
Yeah.
reasons
Yeah.
why Nostr is amazing.
Yeah. Do you think it's
What are your
sustainable?
views on Nostr overall? Like if you just, I feel like it's so exciting.
It
What's
is
your bullish
exciting
case
and
for
it's
that?
new, like what I have a bunch of fears, but let's do what I think are good first. I mean, obviously, like the non-censorship stuff, especially coming out of COVID, like we've seen what the major media platforms are doing. Like they just silence stuff, the algorithm this, algorithm that. And like when I go on Twitter, like Twitter thinks that I like two things: angry culture war stuff, like somebody who's upset about trans women or like anything else that in the culture war space, and cute videos of animals. Right? Like those are the two things that the algorithm thinks that I like. And it's like apparently because I like those things and I keep engaging with. I don't know. Like the algorithm knows something, right? So you get very weird things. So it's very nice to be off that and just like Nostr's really boring to be on. It's not a time thief, really. Like you go on there, you scroll a little bit, and it's like, yeah, let's go have dinner. Let's go for a walk. Like there's nothing really like algorithmically like targeted to capture your eyeballs, and it's really relieving. It's really nice. So that I'm really hopeful about. And then obviously like being kicked off platforms. I saw Paul Saladino coming on Nostr just a few days ago because he apparently got kicked off YouTube or something, saying too much things against the regime. So yeah, that I really like. That aspect I really like. The sapping culture, like you mentioned, I really, really like. And like people just give you money for things. It's kind of like unbelievable. You put out a photo, like I went on a hike today and I put out a photo and then people just send me some sats for it. It's like, what? How? And how does this thing work? If you just think through the logic of this, everybody does something nice every day. Like, why does like where does the money come from? Like this is another thing that I'm thinking about for Stacker News too, which is, like I've just been there for a few months. I don't understand quite how this business model works. But for now, they seem to be trying to bootstrap a news platform, like a news bulletin with announcements and ads and stuff. But they are basically donation funding it, and then all the stackers get benefit from the donations. And I think the same thing is happening a little bit in Austria too. There are a couple of power players that are happy to sap a lot, like Odell and others. It's like sap like crazy, right? Which is wonderful for the rest of us, but it does seem a little bit like a redistribution of their sats. I'm happy to take their sats. Don't get me wrong, right? But does this work? Like in a big scale, like times 10, times 100, does this work as an information platform? Is it just going to be like you get one sap a year as a normal pleb for something? Like the scaling here, or like not technical scaling, but the social monetary scaling here, I don't quite see how that works. Like there's a reason that Twitter is free and that it profits off ads and its targeting. And yeah, I don't know.
It's early days, and it's really interesting to see how it will all unfold. And
yeah, exactly.
Real quick, I had an idea as you were talking about that, how you posted your picture and got zapped for it this morning. For anyone who may be listening and isn't aware, I'm gonna share my screen real quick and just show you exactly how easy this is, because I feel like there are still people who don't know this. So I'm gonna click share. Gonna go over. Do you see Primal right here?
Yeah.
Joachim book. Pull up his profile. Happy Sunday. Oh, look, it's a cool mountain. It's taking a second to load.
Yeah, a bunch of snow. Like, we get 3
no one
hours.
problem is the loading.
Yeah. We get 3 hours.
I trust it's a beautiful picture. I'm going to click like, and there's a zap button right there. That's how easy it is. Literally zap, and you're done. And like, dude, people just see these cool things, and it's just right there by the like button. And all the different clients have it super easy like that. So, and here's another cool thing that I love is
the messages,
notice when I just click zap, it has my default amount is 206, the Seattle area code, which I love. And I have a link to my latest podcast right there. So this is the Zapvertising model. I
love the Zapvertising. That's so cool.
Yeah, because then everybody wins. Again, like there's so many just incentive win-wins here.
Yeah.
where like you get zapped, you get paid for your post, and I win because I just promoted my podcast to you and anyone else who visits that
Yeah.
image. And so this is another like incentive for people to create good content that
Yeah.
does well, because there's like it turns into a bidding war on your post of people trying to like send the most sats so they
Exactly.
get the
Yeah.
top spot with their little custom link.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Yeah, and then they go to Fountain, which is another value for value platform where people send you sats for listening to us chatting about the world. Like, yeah. Like
It's so exciting, man.
Like I don't understand what I don't understand hasn't really arrived yet. I don't understand why the lowly musicians aren't there. Like music is such a weird industry, right? Like only the top, I guess porn as well. Like only the top really, really benefit, right? Like everybody else in this like pyramid of people who try to make music don't make money, right? Like they either can't support themselves, or they have like tiny gigs that don't pay enough, or they have 5,000 listenings on Spotify, right? That doesn't pay anything. But show up to Nostr and have 5,000 people listen to your thing, like 1,000 of them saps you a little bit, and then you do that 100 times a month. Right? Do the math and see if that's better, but I would assume it is. So I don't understand why the entertainers and the artsy people haven't showed up yet. That seems weird.
I think that's a great question, and the reason why I brought Ainsley Costello and Joe Martin on earlier this year, because they're the two big ones. There's some others too. Those are just the two that I know of and follow that have really been pushing this hard. And just in the last few weeks, they've both been bringing more artists on. Like they've been going hard. Ainsley brought this girl Catherine. I remember her last name. I think she just goes by Catherine is her name. But super cool song that she posted. She's from Nashville as well, and she just joined. Joe Martin brought over Theo Katzman, who I had never heard of until he shared about that. He's a member of the Wolfpack band. And I listened to both of their music because this is still early days. You get a bonus for being early for sure, because people are like looking for these artists. We want to support you and show you love. So I listened to both of their work and sent them zaps, and it's crazy there aren't more of them. But I think that I'm looking forward to listening back to this conversation in a not too distant future, because I think that we're sitting on like a massive explosion coming. I think that 2025 is going to be a huge year for more of these artists and content creators finding out about this, because it's starting to pick up steam in a big way. Like my first podcast I did with Derek Ross in I think early 2023, we were like joking on that podcast about how it's pretty much all Bitcoiners circle jerking at that point. It's like a Bitcoin, as Rabble put it in one of his presentations, Nostr is like a Bitcoin meetup, for the early days. Because it's mostly a bunch of Bitcoiners who are already dialed into the freedom and the decentralization and the zapping and all that. But more and more people are figuring out this is a great way for me to vault my content to the next level and actually be seen and actually be rewarded for interacting with the community. And this isn't just small people. Like you mentioned how it's really good for small people, which it definitely is, but it's great for big people as well, who have big targets on their back for censorship and more to lose from being censored. That's why Dr. Ken Berry and Paul Saladino are like very quickly falling in love with it, because this fixes their needs and problems as well as big content creators. So across the spectrum, it just helps everybody.
For sure.
Why you got to ask, like, man, this is going to really take off at some point. And just a couple of weeks ago, I'm not sure if you caught this, but Mark Andreessen, who's kind of like a fiat crypto dude, came on Joe Rogan, and Joe like asked him, like, they're talking about Jack Dorsey, what Jack Dorsey's up to. And he mentioned, Jack Dorsey's at Nostr now, and OSTR. He literally spelled it out for people. They didn't go into it that much because I doubt he even really knows about it. But it's already made it on the biggest podcast in the world. So like if we see a Nostr episode on Joe Rogan, it's going to go off, and he needs to just bring Jack Dorsey back because we know he'll go there.
But this is so I love being a little bit in Bitcoin. So I'm in this Bitcoin world, right? Like I'm on Nostr every day, and I sap people, and I see this community. Like on the daily, it doesn't really change very much, right? Like it's the same day in and day out, and it's like maybe there's a new person, whatever. But like over time, you're just like, holy smokes! Like the first time I went on Nostr, it was silent and boring, and I lost my NPub, and whatever. What the fuck is this, right? Like, this is not going to work. And then people kept telling me that I should come back on. It's amazing, blah blah blah. And it took like 6 months before I like got my shit together. So I'm sort of in that world, but I'm also in the normal fiat world among normal economists and classical liberals and people who are experts in some weird think tank policy, whatever thing. So this summer, right, just a few months ago, I was giving a presentation on Nostr among maybe 25, 30 classical liberals in Sweden, like between the ages of 20 and 50. They're all academics, they're all think tanky people, like smart intellectuals. None of them have heard of Nostr. Nobody's on it. Like, nobody uses Bitcoin. Nobody thinks about Bitcoin. Like, the real world is so, like, it's just, people are just not there at all. And I have a hard time bridging this gap. Like, here's this massive, amazing technology that can do all these things. And it makes earning money from podcasts and music and art and all kinds of other things, comments or clever things, so much more effortless. Like, there's no like, oh, sign up to my Patreon and whatever. Like, give me your credit card detail. Like, no, just send the money, whatever. And then in the normal world that I also hang out sometimes, it's like, no, it's just same old, same old. They're upset about a tax rate moving 0.1%. It's like, who the fuck cares? Like, get on Nostr and like do something, right? Like, without doxing the magazine I've been working for during the fall, a fiat magazine ish, that try to brag how techno friendly they are, and that, so they had a donation run for my second last week. So like right before I finished, they had a donation run. It's like, oh yeah, give us money so that we can keep going. We're an amazing political magazine, and we do all these things. And so they had, oh, we even accept crypto. We're so like friendly towards all this shit. So I was like, okay, let's try, let's see. Like, I have some experience with the Nostr people. I know how people like fundraise. You go to a website, you get a QR code, boom, you send some money, bam, like on chain or Lightning or whatever you want. Like, it's very easy. So I go to this place and it's like 7 different options. Like, you can tie in your MetaMask wallet, you can sign into your Coinbase, you can like do this thing or that thing. I'm like, what? Like, but this is like, I don't know how to explain to people how this is not the same thing. This is just old fiat stuff. Like, I can, like, if those are all the hoops I need to jump through to pay Bitcoin to you guys, I might as well just use a credit card and pay you fiat money. It's just as annoying. Like, this is just not right. And I don't like. And again, like I with musicians who are trying out, like, I know a musician in my village here. And she's pretty awesome and pretty experimental. And she's like, oh, I'm trying to make this label and try to get this gig. And she puts on stuff and whatever, but she's not a Nostr. Like, she doesn't make much money from her music, but she could. But she's not on. It's like, it's like, at some level, my economist brain just doesn't work here. It's like, why is this not being competed away? Why does this not work? Like, why are people not, like, are we just so fucking early? Like, what's going on?
I think that's the easy answer, because it's literally only a couple of years old. Like, it's brand new, so we are really super early. And I think you just got the quote that sums it up right there. Get on Nostr and do something.
Yeah.
Just started to rant with that. I think that's a great way to start wrapping up this whole episode, because I think that's where, people need to just go start on Nostr. Even if you don't want to go down through like these giant rabbit holes we gave earlier of like the health and the diet, or the Bitcoin, like the whole financial system's a lie. Like, those are quite daunting rabbit holes. They're big, amazing ones, but you can just start by getting on Nostr and just start getting paid for the shit that you throw up there. Just posting pictures of your cat. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So like, it's a great entryway, an entry point to all of this madness. You can just start, going in there and listening to people and engaging with people, making friends. It's a perfect way to start on all this stuff. And sure. Really, really excited about what the future holds. And Joachim, my friend, I have another podcast in about 15 minutes. I'm going to try to run to the kitchen and scarf down a breakfast steak before that. So why don't we wrap this up here? I know we'll do another episode in the future, because I have a ton of notes I didn't even touch. So why don't you tell us where people can go find you and more of your work?
Yeah, fantastic, man, and thanks for having me on. We barely even talked about money, which is supposed to be my
I know
specialty
that
at
was the
all.
whole plan. We're gonna do another one.
Yeah, whatever. It happens. Yeah, just Google my name, Joachim Buch. I'm mostly on Stacker News these days. My handle there is Den Lilla Apan. And I write a bunch about money, and I'm starting to do like a Jordan Peterson book club on there too. Otherwise, I write for the Daily Economy at the American Institute for Economic Research, like once or twice a month. And go to my Nostr, obviously. I'm sure it will be linked there. Just search my name, Joachim Buch. Yeah, otherwise, the Mises Institute, AIR, Twitter, almost never Twitter, but if you want that, go ahead.
Only if you're using Twitter to tell people to come to Nostr. That's what all the
Yeah,
cool kids are doing.
that's what the cool kids are doing, man.
Awesome. I will put all those links in the show notes, my friend. Really appreciate you and just jumping on out of nowhere this morning. I just sent you a message that let's do it. I'm
Let's
just
do
doing
it.
more and more of that lately. It's just always a good
Yeah,
conversation. So I appreciate you participating, and we'll do another one soon.